Welcome to the Second Bite podcast, where we talk with top entrepreneurs and CEOs about creating valuable companies through creative transactions. Now, let's get started with the show.
Welcome to the Second Bite podcast. I am Todd Taskey, and I am your host. And today I've got a great guest with me, Doug Hathaway. Doug, now from Legify, but we're going to talk about the transaction that you had with DadeSystems a bunch of years ago, actually. But Doug, I'm super happy that you could join me.
Yeah, it was great to meet you at the Legal Tech Fund Summit in Austin, and we had a great conversation and excited to kind of rehash some of that today and talk about some new stuff.
Yeah, we had a really interesting conversation over dinner, so I'm happy that we can bring this to our listeners. Why don't we start with, if you could, you co-founded DadeSystems back in 2010, 2011?
Yeah, 2011. Yeah.
Tell me about DadeSystems, what you do, what it did, and who did you serve?
Sure. Yeah. So it was I was working in defense at the time. I was one of like 1 million employees at a defense contractor, and wanted to start something new. So I got together with some investors that had previously exited a fintech. Or actually, this was kind of before fintech was a word. They were in financial technology. And early on, we had a plan to service homeowners associations to be able to pay their fees and whatnot. But we pivoted very quickly out of that. One of our investors was involved with a software vendor that sold to credit unions. And this software vendor had sold some vaporware that didn't exist. They sold to credit unions a payment processing software to process loans, like physical check payments for loans. And I had some background in dealing with digital imaging and scanners and whatnot. So like almost the first week, we pivoted and built a system that processed the back-end mailroom check payments for credit unions. And we had a built-in customer base that had been sold this software, and they couldn't deliver for like 2-3 years. So we were under the gun immediately. So in 6 months, we put together a POC, sort of MVP, and it went live with a top 10 credit union in California. I got a lot of stories about that, but so we wanted to do cloud, but cloud was a bad word in 2011. So we deployed it on site. Learned a lot in that process. I always say that, my startup process my journey was great because I got to make all my mistakes when we were small and I learned from those. So long story short, we serviced the credit union industry for a while, but then we pivoted into B2B payment automation because it was a bigger marketplace. So the same platform that could process credit union loans, loan payments, like, a check and a coupon, we found that there was a big need in the business to business space. So when one business pays another, it's actually a little complicated. At least back in 2011, 2012, there's still a lot of check payments, meaning that when one business paid another, it was like a check for 50 grand and then a piece of paper listing invoices to be paid. And most of the time, the back end of these businesses were receiving these payments. Maybe they were scanning the check for deposit, but they were manually applying the invoices to their accounts receivable system to say, hey, this is what's being paid. They were doing that, or they were paying a bank to do it, but overall it was very inefficient. So we had been playing with a lot of optical character recognition, like early AI stuff. So we ended up building on top of what we had for credit unions, a sophisticated system that really streamlined that process of receiving that payment and applying it to the ERP. So we connected a bunch of data points to the ERP. We were able to either drive scanners or import images from a bank, and it turned what would be a 5-minute process to a 5-second process for an individual payment. So we grew from there and got into tons of industries. The industries we served the most were those with a lot of invoicing and payments. So think food distribution, concrete supply, building materials. Wherever there's a lot of commerce going on, we was get in the middle of that and help streamline the application of those payments. So that, long story short, but that's what we did.
And you never considered the idea of being a service provider. You were always going to provide software or a SaaS solution.
Correct. Yeah. So the legacy company that my co-founder had previously was a service provider, meaning that they would receive the mail and do the work for banks and for large corporates. And he said that he wanted to do pure software rather than service because most of the time he was just dealing with people, right? He had a few hundred people doing this, and the second go around he wanted to be more of a pure SaaS play, which we got to eventually. But just providing the software as a technology partner allowed us to be a lot more efficient. We had a small team we serviced like Fortune 500 companies as a 30-person company.
Wow. So there's, as I understand, the biggest challenge from that standpoint with a service business. If you and I started a service business, we could be profitable in our first year. We could be very profitable in our first year. Whereas if you're in SaaS or software, the gap is longer and wider and deeper. How did you guys do it?
Yeah. Number of years before we were able to become profitable, most of the time is spent pouring money back into the platform. But what you get is a robust platform at the end of the day. Every customer that we had a little bit of a tweak or some suggestions or whatnot. And we had a few very important ones that we worked closely with in certain industries to just make the software better and better. So you're right in that it wasn't profitable, but what we were building ultimately we ended up selling because the value was in the platform that we had built over a decade actually.
And so to get yourself to the point where you could sell or you're sustainable, you raised money to make that work?
Yeah. So we started off like angel investing, like I invested. We had a small group. The key here was this was not the first go around of my co-founder. It was my first go around. I was late 20s starting this out. And so having that track record, it was easier, right, to get some investors to go with us early on. We did take some VC money. We had various rounds of capital that we needed. We were always very efficient though with the capital. We didn't really like the idea of being not super profitable, but our competition was 10 times our size and was raising 10 times the amount of money. So it was a little bit of an arms race when it came to raising money.
How much of the company did you ultimately have to give away to raise the capital required, roughly?
So every time there was a capital call, our original founders would match in order to not be diluted.
Yeah.
So ultimately, the percentage wasn't a whole lot because they were fortunate enough to be able to match. So probably around 40% of the company was outside of the original investors at the end of the day.
So when you bring in friends and family, no question about who's in charge. When you bring in professional or VC money, people have different opinions about who's in charge. What did you notice about the difference with the VC community and the people that you selected as your partner? What changed the most when you brought them on board?
That's a good question. So things evolved pretty quickly as we got more sophisticated money. So early on, maybe the word was more a colloquial board that we have. It was more the board, the investors. I was sort of on the board. We would have lunch, as a board meeting. It was more local. But as we got more sophisticated, we had to have like a real board. I sort of had to take a step back a bit. As CTO, I just focused on operations. The board became more sophisticated.
How many on the board when it became sophisticated?
Probably about 6 to 8 when we got sophisticated. And so as we got more sophisticated, right? We started with like a local VC. They wanted a seat. Then we did end up. So in our journey, we ended up servicing banks. So banks wanted to white label our solution. So Fifth Third Bank was a big one of ours. They invested in the company and also took a board seat. Wells Fargo Bank also invested in our company, used the product, and also had a board seat. But those were amazing opportunities for us. So we were happy to do that.
Sure.
Hindsight, the pricing that they got wasn't great, but they helped us grow up and provided the guidance to make the board more enterprise focused, so that when we were having conversations about an acquisition, like we were there, we were ready to go. We had to get like audited financials and whatnot.
So you said
start there though. You got to have something before you get sophisticated, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And it gets to my next question, which is, you said you had to take a step back. I'm assuming that step back came when somebody knocked on your office door and said, "Hey, Doug, the guys from Fifth Third need a board seat and you're out."
Yeah, I'd be lying if I wasn't like a little perturbed, but I understood, like, okay, I need to focus. I need to be CTO. I'm not going to be in the board meetings anymore. I'll attend for my section or whatever, which always got pushed off at the end and then never happened. So, but the direction we were going was positive. So I focused on honing my craft, building the right team, reporting up a bit. So yeah, not that I was pushed out, but it was the evolution of the company.
Well, and I think that's what makes some co-founders great, I think, is the willingness to do what's required to make a business successful long-term and to keep your eye on the prize, which is, if we're going to build something valuable and I want to get paid at the end, I would imagine as a first-time founder and you've got 3 large customers and you've got this CEO and you've got a VC, maybe those guys have more expertise around managing a business that's growing like this. And when we need technical expertise, we'll just have Doug join a meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. And, my management team, my CEO and president were very, very open. Like it's not like I didn't know what was going on in the meetings. Like I would debrief, we would talk. Like I was definitely part of all the conversations, just not in the boardroom, So like I felt comfortable with that. If anything, they were kind of boring after I heard what was going on. I was like, okay, well, I got better things to do than that.
Sure.
Yeah.
So then Versapay shows up. Did they come knock on the door, Doug, or did you guys decide, hey, we've got something valuable here. We've got a lot of money to spend to keep current with the bigger guys, and let's run a process and have a selection from some interested parties? Or when Versapay, take me through that, please.
Yeah. So we would run into Versapay on the conference circuit. So, we would get exposed to them. Sometimes in RFPs, we would see them as competition. We would beat them. Sometimes, most of the time, we would see them at AFP, the Association for Financial Professionals. It's a really big conference for folks in this industry every year. And so they had a gap in what we did. So if you think about the problem that I just described of a streamlining payments from a payer to the ERP, we approach it from the bottom down, meaning that, hey, we're taking your messy work, like your just jacked up process that you have today, and we're going to streamline it using AI and machine learning, right? We also had like a payment portal, but it was kind of like a nice to have. Versapay took it from the top down. They built a very robust online payment platform, kind of future focused, so that vendors could pay online, which some did. But the reality is that for any business of size, you're going to have a lot on top and a lot on bottom. Like they're going to still pay the legacy way. So Versapay had that gap with the sort of manual payments. And so they had done a partnership with another company that was doing okay. They then partnered with us as hey, let's try before we buy. I mean, that's not what they said at the time. We were happy to
just a partnership.
Yeah, they were just partners for about a year, which was great. We got to know them as vendors of ours, as partners of ours. It ended up, sort of serendipitously, they were using the same technology stack as us, as a framework called Ruby on Rails. So there was a lot of synergies there. I got along really well with their CEO, who I'm still friends with today. So during that year, they saw that we could fill their gap. And the PE company that owned them, Great Hill, put 5 companies together. Well, we were the 5th, so they have put 4 together. And I remember at one of these AFPs, it was in Washington, D.C. Great Hill was there. The folks from Versapay were there. And they're having breakfast with my CEO and my chairman of the board. And I'm like, oh, things are getting interesting here. I could see what they're talking about. Again, I'm kind of on the sidelines. I'm not front and center in the transaction, but I'm seeing it happen. So that started after that partnership, it started the talks of an acquisition, which, I know we have a whole lot of time, but that was probably the 5th acquisition conversation we had over the 10 years. We got pretty close.
You had them one at a time.
Yeah. Every other year we would get pretty heavy. We even got to like maybe the 5-yard line on a few, people coming down, dinners, this and that. And then for one reason or another, it didn't work out. And so I try to trick myself into thinking, okay, this isn't going to work out.
Hard to do, right?
Heartbreakers.
Do you remember why the other ones didn't happen?
One of them, we flew up to New York and it was like ready to sign, and then they changed the deal last minute, and we walked away, which was a good thing. Mm-hmm. The other one, when they came down, I think the technology was just too different. I think I maybe confused them about I was a proponent of more modern development approaches, and they were like a Microsoft shop, which is, things have since evolved since then. So I think that there wasn't a technical fit there. It might have been my fault, but it didn't work out. With this one, if anything, they wanted to learn from us. Well, that was what I thought in the process as far as what we built.
So at the time, can you give me a rough idea on how big you guys were?
Yeah, so we were less than 10 million in revenue. This is like SaaS revenue, which is all contracts, three-year contracts.
Yeah, so it's recurring revenue.
Recurring, yeah. There's
recurring SaaS revenue.
Recurring SaaS. Our contract value was between maybe 10, 15K ARR up to like 50 to 100K ARR for larger deals. Mm-hmm. And we had our momentum was quite great in that we got big deals. Like I think right before we were acquired, we sold to US Foods, which is like one of the biggest food distributors in the US. And that took like a year to close the deal. So we were getting bigger and bigger customers, and it's sort of our pitch was like, hey, if you don't get us now, it keeps going up because we're doing it on our own. Yeah.
So thank you for that. One of the things that I always find interesting, so you guys are building a great business and focused on building a great business. One of the things I tell guys oftentimes is that what impacts the value of your business, maybe more than anything else, is what's going on in a boardroom somewhere else in the country. Because somebody like Versapay says, our AR automation is not where it needs to be. And we're going to could you comment on that? Was that the experience just with Versapay, or was that the experience with everybody else?
I think what we found and we threw over the 10 years, we threw a lot of stuff at the wall, right? We tried a lot of different things. And when you're small, you can do that and just see what sticks, right? And so what we found is that niche of AR automation, nobody else was doing really great, or at least there was no small players. So we tried to hone in on go deeper on that rather than being more broad in functionality. We choose to go deeper into this sort of niche, but it's multi-billion-dollar niche, deeper into that functionality so that we could be the best at that.
Yeah.
Rather than, we did have plans. Like there was a plan B if we didn't get acquired. We had plans to okay, maybe we can do this on our own and build out other functionality. And we had some stuff on the whiteboard, but that all kind of got curtailed once we got more serious talks going on.
So two-part question now. So deal closes. Emotionally, tell me, what's it like when you put a bunch of zeros in your bank account? Emotionally, how did that impact you? And then secondly, you're still CTO, but now it's in a bigger organization. And what does that mean? And take me through those two things.
Sure, I'll answer the first one because the deal actually died once.
Oof.
It died. There were some circumstances where not to get into the gory details, but like it died, and it was on, or maybe it was like life support, maybe a pulse. And I remember I had planned like going to vacation, and like it died right before, and I was like, whatever. And I knew it was gonna happen. I was like, I knew this was gonna happen. It was gonna die. And so I went on the cruise with my family and kind of just disconnected for a little bit. And then when I came back, I got a call. Hey, it's back on. It's back on. Whatever it was, they got through it. And ultimately it did, it closed. And so here's me 11 years in, and, this is every year I'm telling my wife, hey, let's do another year, or are we going to stick with this? My kids are growing up now, and I'm like, man, okay. So seeing that those zeros, was, first of all, I was very grateful in that, in my experience, the hard work doesn't just get you there. It's hard work, and it's grace, it's luck, it's the right connection, the right conversation that you had. So all those things that were out of my control happened the right way, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. It easily could have gone the other way. It was on like a knife's edge, especially because in the timing. So this is 2022, which is right before things went really quiet. On the acquisition front, and the whole SPAC thing went to crap. So it was I kind of felt numb for a little bit. Like, is this really happening? And I was keen to like continue my role, but I was also like, man, I just need to like just chill out for a second. I've been doing this for 11 years, and I tried to turn it off, but I remember we were still onboarding that big customer, that US Foods, and I was like, hey, I can't take my foot off the gas here. We got to like deliver on this value, because they just, they acquired us. They want to do all these great things. So I stuck with it for a while, working weekends, all those types of things, because it was in my nature. Like I just kept doing that for a while. That wasn't the case for all 3 years. There's, some things that happened in.
You say all 3 years. Did you have an earnout for 3 year?
I had like a 1 year retention sort of earnout. Most of everything happened like on transaction day. And then I had a retention period for about a year for like another kicker, which was very helpful.
And that was not in the deal. That was in an employment agreement tied to
that. So the way that it worked is like if in the X amount of money that was for the deal, they had to set aside like, I want to say like 5% of that cash that would be used for retention for key employees for a year. They tried to do 2 years for me, but I was like, what about just 1 year? So that I did do. I'm not the best negotiator, but I did negotiate a little bit during that retention that ended up benefiting me pretty well over those.
What else do you remember about the employment agreement that was important to you? Was there a non-compete in there?
There was a non-compete. There's a non-compete, which ended up being pretty, it guided a lot of my decisioning in my new venture here. I wanted to make sure that, I talked to a lot of lawyers. They say that those are hard to enforce or whatnot, but I didn't want to. I wanted to stay true to the spirit of it. Like, I did really well with with the whole transaction. I didn't want to turn around and then try to tempt fate by doing something.
For our listeners, I'll make this point. It is true that an employment agreement is hard to enforce.
Yeah.
An employment agreement tied to a transaction is fully and completely enforceable because it's a consideration for the deal. So completely different from that perspective. Did you hire a lawyer to help you with the employment agreement? And did you try to negotiate the limits of that non-compete so that you could be a CTO in a different vertical what were some of the complications?
Yeah, so the terms of the it was a little bit of not great timing on their end, in that the terms of the acquisition didn't include any type of retention for me. It was only until after the acquisition was completed and finalized that then we talked about retention. And I was like, well, I'm not trying to play with you guys, but this is already done. So I'm kind of in a good position here. And they're like, well, yeah, you are. And so I didn't take full advantage. I worked out something equitable, but my retention and non-compete was not tied to the acquisition.
Excellent. Okay. And then your non-compete, it could be as a CTO in fintech, or it could just be in AR systems. It could just be in food service. How did you come to
pretty specific? It was around direct competition to the company. So involved, basically I couldn't go and build this again over, I think it's a 2-year period. It was pretty specific about not just fintech in general. It's more about the accounts receivable automation, doing what we do. I can't go to, there's listed competitors on there, which makes sense.
Yeah.
I was never approached by any of those guys, or neither did I want to stay in that specific industry. The company that I'm at now, it's a very good overlap. There's not any competition. It's in lending. It does have this similar concepts of trying to, free up capital or, apply. Sure. It's in lending, but, and I'm using a lot of the same motions, but it's not it's not the same, product.
One of the reasons I wanted to have your remarks, which have been great, is you have a little bit of a different perspective. A lot of times we have founders on here where they drive the transaction and they're making the key decisions and the rest. And I want to get the perspective from somebody that's an owner, but not the driver of the transaction. Yeah. For somebody else that's in that role, that's a minority owner, a significant executive, what advice would you give because it's so important for the business to continue to perform through the due diligence process, that roles and responsibilities have to be allocated. What advice would you give to somebody that was kind of...
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's almost too much information is sometimes dangerous, in that if you knowing all this comes with some baggage, in that first of all, you don't really want to, it's a conundrum. You want to let your team know, but you don't, because you want them to focus. You still have to deliver, because it could die, and it did. It could die, and then we're still in the same position we were 3 months ago. If anything, we're a little lower because everyone else is distracted on this acquisition. So, but with the right mentality, you can absorb that information and compartmentalize it and say, hey, yeah, this may happen, but it may not. And those other failed attempts helped me, knowing that, hey, we got to keep driving this ship. We have still to deliver. We still have to deliver on our promises. Even if we do sell, we still want to hold up our professional, commitments. So we still have to deliver. There was a little bit of a challenge when it did happen. I had to let some key employees know that it's happening, and they were excited, but also hey, you didn't tell me. And well, I tried to walk them through, but no one wants to be in the dark about stuff like this, but sometimes you have to make that judgment call as a leader.
Yeah, tricky. So now you are fresh in LawFi. Talk a little bit about what LawFi does and who you do it for.
Sure. Yeah. So we're LawFi, the first of its kind legal financing, so legal fee loans. The sort of elevator pitch is that if you find yourself in need of a lawyer for something good or bad in your life, right, and anything that's more like transactional in nature, and you need legal representation, you talk to a lawyer, and they say, great, we can help you with this challenge. It's going to be a $10,000 retainer for us to get going. If you find yourself where you're like, well, maybe I don't have the 10K, or maybe I don't want to, liquidate stuff. There's not a lot of great options to get a loan for that. There's really none. Banks don't really understand legal. You could get a really bad credit card loan. So the idea is that with LawFi, we onboard law firms into our network so that when that conversation happens, hey, Mr. Client, it's going to be $10,000. Would you like to pay cash, credit card, or can you apply for financing? So right there, it's kind of like it's consumer-based lending at the point of sale, and we're selling your services, right? So you, as the consumer there, you would apply for a loan real quickly. You get approved. The money goes straight to the lawyer. They can start your case like the same day. We fund instantly. And then you pay that loan back over the 1 to 3 years, just kind of like a car loan, and get that legal matter resolved in your life. And then on the law firm side, they get the payment, with no recourse. They get paid up front. We do take a little haircut the next day, like a merchant discount fee, which is like cost of business thing. And for a lawyer, their general write-off rate is 20 to 10%. So for every dollar, they're writing off 20 cents, 10 cents.
Cash up front is fantastic.
So we'll charge a 10%, which is a net win for them because they have to work hard for that 10% write-off rate. For this, they just click a button and they get the money.
Yeah, so, that's beautiful.
Yeah. So yeah, we launched in June. I came on board shortly after that, full time, and we're going. We've got some big names behind us.
And so, if I wanted to track you down, I know I can find Doug Hathaway on LinkedIn. What about if I want to learn more on the company? How would I find
LawFi.com, LAWFI.com. Our website's kind of in flux right now. We're rebranding a little bit, but the website will clue you in.
Yeah, and the website will be on the show notes. Your email and LinkedIn will also be on the show notes. Doug, this was a great episode. It was really great to get your perspective. We went a bit longer than usual, which I would imagine that our audience appreciated hearing from you. So great to have you as a guest. Thanks, and best of luck with LawFi moving forward.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Second Bite podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.